Good morning, participants, and once again I welcome for this FDP, Holistic Approaches for Excellence in Pharmaceutical Education, Research and Publishing. So we have the 7 days, 8 days of this total FDP, and out of this, the second day by Sri Dr. MUNIR Ahmed R. Sir is actually working as a director of the Rajiv Gandhi Health University. And sir, I'm very much happy that you gladly accepted our invitation and for benefiting to sensitize the different educational platforms, online and offline and all these things. I am very much fascinated, sir. Actually, I had your class. I was very much, I was entered the day. I was very happy. So that is the thing. What actually drove me that anyhow I should see that. You speak again to the people of this area, those who are missed. So, in that objective, I have started, sir. And now I request Mr. Jogendra Kumar to introduce our Sir MUNIR, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Good morning. Good morning, sir. Good morning, all the participants. Dr. MUNIR Ahmed R, Adjunct Professor and Director, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Academic and Administrative Training Institute, under the prestigious Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Karnataka, and Professor at Postgraduate Department of Repertory, Government Homeopathic Medical College, Bangalore. He has been engaged in creating a confluence of health professional education on scientific principles and scholarship since 2 decades. With a wide range of qualifications awarded by universities in India and abroad in the domains of homeopathy, medical education, teaching technology, instructional design, learning and development, education management, and an international TESOL diploma. He has developed expertise in learning and development as applied to healthcare education domain. Dr. MUNIR Ahmed sir has taken a lead for creating harmony in learning ecosystems by the way of designing unique templates for curriculum delivery design for both undergraduate and postgraduate courses, which now form the basis for development and delivery of courses in the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Karnataka. He has also advised other universities in India and abroad for their curriculum design. To complement the quality improvement in healthcare education, he has designed training verticals for teachers in the domain of educational methodology and developed quality indicators for assessing institutional and faculty performance. In recognition, he has bestowed by Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Karnataka with Teachers' Day honors in the field of homeopathy education and health professional education. The Association of Pharmaceutical Teachers of India, APTA, honored him with prestigious Srimati Kamlaben Vaidya Award for outstanding contribution to the APTA's vision for teaching development. The Homeopathic Medical Association of India has honored him with Dr. Prahlad Wagankar Teacher Award. Thanking you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jogendra. Sir, please proceed. Sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good morning and welcome all of the participants to this session on faculty development. I bring greetings from Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Karnataka, which is celebrating its silver jubilee of foundation this year. When we talk of teacher education or training the teachers in education methodology, there's a kind of bewilderment with some of the teachers. Senior teachers sometimes think, what is there for me to learn? I have been teaching for so long. And those who are in the junior faculty levels, perhaps they might think, what is there to learn about teaching? Because we have seen our teachers teaching us and we are also following them. This is a kind of feeling that many of the teachers have. But let me dispel you with these notions that teaching is also a separate profession which requires training and kind of educational qualification, which is distinct for teaching as a profession. Especially in the professionals education like healthcare education or engineering education, there is not much of a formal training for teachers to be a trainer, to be a teacher. With our postgraduate qualifications in whichever specialities that we get into, with our postgraduate qualification, we assume the role of teachers, and we become teachers. Not only teachers, we also become assessors, like conducting examinations, without much knowing about the background of these things. So therefore, in Rajiv Gandhi University, in fact, there is a world over, there is a kind of movement in the Western universities for training the teachers in the professional growth, in the area of educational management also, like how to plan a lesson, how to conduct a student assessment, how to understand the student need. All these things are considered very important aspects of teacher development and a part of the career growth of the teacher. Therefore, in the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, we have taken up this task of training all the teachers in our affiliated colleges in the area of educational methodology, so that they can apply these principles into their teaching and also into the student assessment. For this purpose, we have established a separate institute called RGHS, or Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences Academic and Administrative Training Institute, or RATI, which is tasked with the training of teachers and the educational administrators in various verticals of training. But this, whatever I am presenting to you, is one of the basic entry-level training that we conduct for the teachers and also for our postgraduate students. So this is a kind of heading that we have given for this training called Orientation for Pharmacy Teachers in Education Methodology. I understand that there are teachers from engineering background also. So this could be for pharmacy teachers also, for engineering teachers also, or for whichever teachers in the university level education. The purpose of this is to orient the teachers of pharmacy profession or any professional education and the principles of educational methodology as relevant to pharmaceutical education or professional education. At the end of this session, you will be in a position to reflect on the importance of the concepts of teaching and student assessment as a part of your career as a teacher. This is a take-home message for you, only to reflect on what is the importance of whatever concepts that we discuss to develop you as a teacher, as a professional teacher. At the end of this session, you will be in a position to discuss the components of curriculum. You will be in a position to illustrate a basic teaching model. You can relate the role of constructive alignment for teaching and assessment. You can recall the factors that promote the learning outcomes. You will be in a position to match assessment tools to measure learning outcomes. And finally, you will be in a position to plan a professional development track in educational methodology. These are the objectives that I have set for this session. In fact, I'll come to revisit these objectives at the end of the session. I'll expect you to recall the way I have structured these statements, which I am going to revisit a little later. What I would expect you to remember is that each of these statements has at least two common features. One is each of the statements starts with a verb, an active verb. You could say whether it is discuss or illustrate or relate or whichever is the first word that I have used. All these are a kind of verb, or more precisely an active verb. That is one common feature. Another common feature is all of these objectives or statements tell what you will be in a position to do at the end of this session. They are not telling what I will do. What I will do is incidental to whatever happens during this session, but what is important is what you will be in a position to do. So please remember these two features. One is what you will be able to do at the end of the session, and the first word in each of these statements is a verb or an active verb. When you look at this image, what you can see here is very obvious. There is a tap, there is a glass, and there is some water flowing into the glass. This is a common place that we all see. But if you can draw an analogy between this image and our education system, what can be seen is that the tap is seen as a teacher or an institution, and the glass is the student. The water that is flowing into it is like the knowledge or skills that we are forcing into the students. I'm using the word forcing deliberately because many of the very often the students are not aware of what is the purpose of whatever they are learning. So it becomes a kind of forced learning for them. This is the kind of image, or this is the kind of model that we generally have about education, even if it is higher education. So does this model always work? Sometimes it may work because we need to fill the glass with water. We need to fill the students with some knowledge and basic skills so that they can build on them. But that is the limit. You cannot go beyond that limit to go on filling or force filling the student with the knowledge and skill without their active participation. What is very important is the active engagement of the learners into their learning. So that to understand that, we need to understand the students as a learner and how they learn. For that, we have to be on the track that learner is the focus of all educational activity. Whatever educational activity that we are planning, that we are conducting, it is the student who is the central focus of each of that activity. So with this in the background, let us understand how the students learn. There are about 71 learning theories which are recorded, which explain how the students learn at different ages, at different levels. But I'm going to take about two models, only two models for the because this is an introductory course. Two models which I'm going to take. One of the model is called as VARK model, or VARK model. What it says is we can classify learners as visual learners, those who learn when they only can see. So these are the people who can learn when they see something happening, when they see something around them, and only then they can imagine. For example, Einstein once remarked that I cannot imagine what I cannot see. So therefore, whatever you can surmise that Einstein was a visual learner. There is a kind of categorization of learners which can happen. Now you can see that there are learners who are visual learners. The other type of learners is called auditory learners. Auditory learners are those who can learn when they hear. When they hear something, only then they can learn. Like for example, if you recall your student days or even your teaching days, some of the students perhaps were very vocal in their reading. Like for example, even in the library, when some student was sitting, that student would be reading loudly. The purpose was that student was an auditory learner, so he or she would learn only when they hear something being read. Therefore, as a kind of joke, just a kind of in a lighter vein, if you see some student closing their eyes in your classroom, please do not think that they are disinterested or they're sleeping. Perhaps they're auditory learners and they want to have a complete focus on whatever you are speaking. So this is just a joke kind of thing. So this is the second type of learners. The third type of learner is those who are called reading type of learners. These learners learn only when they read something. Neither seeing something nor hearing something would satisfy their learning. It is only when they are allowed to read on their own they can learn. And the third kind of learners are called as kinesthetic learners. Kinesthetic learners are those who learn only when they can do something. Let me give you an example. In your classroom, sometimes you would have seen some student who was seen to be very disinterested or who was not responding to any of the questions. So sometimes we tend to classify those students as slow learners, as somebody who is who does not know anything, who is an idiot. Various kind of profiling we do about those learners. Perhaps some of those learners, when you see them in action, suppose you take them for a community setup or into a laboratory setup, the kind of work that they can do compared to the others would be phenomenal and perhaps would astonish you. These are the kind of people, students, who are or who might be completely kinesthetic learners. Therefore, what we need to understand is that each of the learner has some learning style, learning strength, and as a teacher, you need to develop that understanding so that you can respond to their learning style. Please remember the slogan, learner is the focus of all educational activity. So whatever activity that we conduct, what we coordinate as teacher is geared for the learners to become established learner to learn on their own, to become to get mastery in their learning. So this is one model of learners, and this could be into children, it could be into adults, it could be any of the age group, because our nature, our style develops right from our childhood. It doesn't come somewhere in between. A person knows that I am an auditory learner, or a person can identify himself or herself as a kinesthetic learner at a very early stage. So this is a model which is applicable to any age. Now let us look at the students whom we would be teaching, mostly adults or adolescents. The adults or adolescents also have some very typical features of learning which distinguish them from the child learners, or the way children learn. These are called as andragogic principles or adult learning principles, which Malcolm Knowles, he developed this as a kind of complete thought process in the 1960s and 70s. So what Knowles says is there are many features of adult learners, but some of the most important features of adult learner is that all the adults come with experience. When you look at any adult learner, your students, or even ourselves, we all have some kind of experience. For example, when I am presenting this is not something which is new for you. You are already having some kind of an experience in teaching, and whenever I am talking this, when I am presenting this, you can relate to your experience, whatever I am talking. So there is a kind of existing experience in all the adult learners, one way or the other. The second feature of adult learner is that each of the adult learner has a self-concept on how he or she learns. This is what we learned in the previous understanding of work type of learning style. Each learner knows the way he or she learns best. The third is learners, adult learners, they learn when they are ready to learn. This readiness to learn is something which is quite kind of subjective, because we do not know how the learners become ready to learn. But there is one measure which tells, you all have seen, the students become ready to learn when the exams are announced. So exam become a kind of trigger for any student to learn. No, it is not the exam which makes the student ready to learn, but the intention to clear the exam or clear an obstacle. So, or to be able to overcome some obstacle. Therefore, when you say readiness to learn is something which the student want to solve a problem or solve a hurdle. So this is the basic inner meaning or the psychology of any learner, that I want to clear that hurdle, I want to overcome that I want to overpower it. So this is a readiness to learn. So readiness to learn is a kind of facing the challenge to overcome something. So please remember this. I'll come to this a little later. The next one is motivation to learn. The students can learn when they are motivated to learn. So this motivation could be something which is intrinsic or extrinsic. Extrinsic motivation is what we see in the readiness to learn, when the students become ready to learn, motivated to learn, to overcome an external obstacle. So this is extrinsic motivation. Students learn because they want to clear an exam. Students want to learn because they want to show that they are good at something. So this is something which is self-limiting. Once the exam is over, that trigger is over. So the other kind of motivation is called intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is something which is inbuilt, and I want to develop myself no matter what, there is an exam or not, no matter what others think. So this is something which is intrinsic. And this intrinsic motivation comes when they relate, when the adults relate the importance of the learning to the authenticity of their professional performance. For example, I'm going to be a particular professional, say I'm going to practice pharmacy at the end of this course. So whatever makes me good pharmacist is an authentic learning experience for me. That is something which is intrinsic motivation for me. Therefore, as a teacher, it becomes our responsibility to demonstrate what is the authenticity of learning in whatever we are teaching for them in their future professional role. That brings in intrinsic motivation. And the last one is called as orientation to learn. Orientation to learn is like we all learn to solve a problem. That is what I said in the context of readiness to learn. We all want to learn in the context of solving a problem, to solve a challenge, to overcome a challenge. And for that, the learning is something which is holistic in completeness, which is very comprehensive. But whatever we see, our education system is such that it is compartmentalized. When we learn a particular course, we learn each of the subjects in that. So we learn the subjects in isolation from one another. But when we have to practice that, we have to bring all these together into the practice. There has to be some kind of alignment of whatever this separate things that we have learned. Therefore, the orientation to learn is something which is comprehensive and holistic. If we can, in our curriculum implementation, the way we implement the curriculum or we present the lesson, if we try to bring about some kind of orientation or some kind of an alignment in the various components of the learning that the students have in their course, I think that would bring about more motivation and orientation to learn. These are some of the background understandings, the way the adults learn. It's very important for us to understand, because adults are our students, are our customers. Now, to explain what is the definition of education, how do we define education, I have taken the definition from a WHO sponsored project. What it says is education is a continuous process. They differentiate it as a product. It's not a product. Education is not something which we say at the end of the course we get a B degree, B Arc degree, or B Pharm degree. It's a process of learning something, and it is something which is continuous. It doesn't stop anywhere. So education is a continuous process which has a chief goal, which has a purpose. There has to be some goal, some purpose in life. So similarly, there has to be some goal or purpose for the course that we have taken up. So what is the purpose of the course that we have taken? What is the course intend to do? Or what does the B Pharm course, BE course intend to do? It has a chief goal, the purpose. The purpose is to bring about desirable changes in the behavior of learners on a relatively permanent basis. So what an educational program does is, it brings about some changes. Say, for example, when the student joins for a course, the first year, the student is at point A. At the end of that course, if the student is still at the point A, then nothing has changed. There is no change in the behavior of learner. The person is behaving the same as if the day he joined or she joined into that particular course. So it doesn't show that there is a kind of change. When you see that the student has changed from or shifted from point A to point B, that is what you wanted. So it has become a desirable change. Suppose the student shifts to something like point C, which is not what you wanted. You wanted the student to shift from point A to point B, not to point C. So therefore, the purpose of the education, when we teach the students, when we train the students, we train the students to be able to change according to the desirable behavior that is expected of the learners. So this is a desirable behavior from A to B, not to C. So therefore, this is what is the purpose of education, definition of education. It is a continuous process which has a goal to bring about desirable changes. This is a keyword, to bring about desirable changes in the behavior of learners, because behavior is what we see in the learners as the performance. We cannot see the performance of learners in any other way than behavior. This is the most basic form of measuring it, and this has to be relatively permanent. Now, how do you bring about this behavior change which are desirable among the learners? So these are brought about by way of the students acquiring knowledge. When the student acquires knowledge, his or her behavior changes by improving the skills. When the student improves the skills, the performance improves. And by developing attitude, when the student has changed an attitude from a particular attitude to another particular attitude, when it becomes more positive, then his or her learning becomes something which we say is desirable. So this is what is the basic definition of education. In that, what you have to remember is one keyword, which is behavior of learners and desirable changes. And the last three lines in this definition: acquiring knowledge, improving skill, developing attitude. I request you to remember these three lines, so that, because I'm going to come back to these three lines in another context. When we talk of curriculum or education, the curriculum or education, as we saw in the previous definition, the purpose of education or purpose of a curriculum is to bring about some desirable changes. Now, to say these desirable changes are particular, this is a purpose. So when you say purpose, the purpose can be equated as a goal or as an objective. So when we say education will have three components. One is to understand what is the purpose of this education. What are the learning objectives? After completing this course, what the student will be able to perform. Outcomes. Outcomes are stated beforehand as the objectives. We expect the student to perform this. And when the student performs, it becomes an outcome. So the learning objectives are the goals that we set for the student. This becomes the first dimension of curriculum. The second dimension of curriculum is the way we support the students to achieve those objectives. These are the teaching learning methods and the teaching learning media. So when you say the teaching learning methods and media, these are the second component of curriculum. You can see that there is an arrow which is showing a two-way connectivity between the learning objective and teaching learning methods and media. What it means is that teaching learning methods and media are dependent on the way the learning objectives are stated. For example, if you state a learning objective in a particular way, if you expect the student to acquire some knowledge, there are some different teaching learning methods and media for helping the student to acquire some knowledge. If you expect the student to develop an attitude, the teaching learning methods would not be the same as that you employ for training a student to acquire knowledge. These would be different. That is what it means. The learning objectives decide how the teaching learning media has to be selected, and the teaching learning methods and media are dependent on the nature of the objectives. Similarly, the third dimension of curriculum is assessment method, and the assessment methods are also dependent on the way the learning objectives are stated. For example, if you want to test a student for his or her knowledge, the way you test would be totally different from the way you test a student to check whether the student is able to perform some skill. So the skill assessment, to test a student's skill, the methods would be different. To test the student's knowledge, the assessment methods would be different. Now you look at the other two components, the other relationship, the relationship between the teaching learning methods media and the assessment methods. These are also interrelated. When you check the assessment, when the student's performance, the student's performance would be dependent on the quality of the teaching that has been given to him, and the quality of the teaching will decide how a student is performing in the examinations or in the assessment methods. These are called as the three components of curriculum. In fact, these three components of curriculum have been taken into another level of understanding called as the constructive alignment by Biggs and Tang. What Biggs explained was that there is a kind of constructive alignment. Constructive is the way students learn, adult students learn by constructing their experience. As you can see, adult learners come with the experience, they already have some experience, and when you teach them, they do not take things as we are telling them. They are relating their learning to the experience that is already there with them. The interaction of what, say for example, whatever I am teaching now and whatever the experience that you already have, there is a kind of interaction between these two, and whatever you observe, whatever you store as your knowledge or your skill or your attitude is dependent on the interaction of what I am speaking with the experience that you already have in the same field. So what Biggs says is there has to be a constructive, that the student, the adult learners should have the facility of constructing their learning, and it has to be in the aligned format. That is to say, the education objectives that we state should be completely aligned the way learning activities are provided. Say for example, learning activities have to be totally inconsistent with the expected outcomes, and similarly the assessment that we conduct should be totally authentic to assess the outcomes that we expect to assess. This is the same that we have discussed in the previous slide. It is a little more a refined way of explaining the same thing. And when we have all these things, if we can reflect the way we are teaching, when we teach, there's a basic teaching model that we are use. In the basic teaching model, what we do is we state these are the objectives, or this is the purpose, or this is what I expect the student to perform at the end of the session. And then very often, or sometimes, what happens is we go directly and teach. This is sometimes is the model that we use. Some other times there is another model that we also use. Say for example, if I have started to teach something which I had stopped in the previous class. I started a topic in the previous class, and today I'm continuing the topic. What you would do in a similar situation is, You will not directly go into the teaching of whatever you want to teach today. You would, on the other hand, ask some questions relating to the topic that you have taught previously in the previous class. After ensuring that the students are on the same page that we expect them to be, to understand what you are going to teach today, you would start teaching that. So here you are trying to assess what the students already know in the form of their knowledge, skill, or attitude, which is what we equate as behavior in the definition of education. What is the behavior of learners now? That is, what is that they already know in their knowledge, skill, and attitude. You make that assessment, and this assessment is called as entry behavior assessment. Entry because it is at the beginning of the class, behavior in relation to the knowledge, skill, attitude that we discussed in the context of the definition of education, and entry behavior assessment. Assess is what we assess with the students, whether they know it or not. So once you assess what the students know, we start the teaching, and after the teaching, we conduct the assessment to check whether the students have learned or not. So this is a basic teaching model. I would like to shift this to a next level to say this is a formula to understand whether our teaching is effective or not, or what is the quality or impact of the teaching that we have done. What happens here is, when we conduct assessment, this assessment gives a feedback to tell whether our teaching was effective or not. Say, for example, in a particular class or a course or in a particular group of students, some of the students are not performing well in a particular subject. Some students are failing repeatedly, are not doing very well as they would do in some other course or with some other teacher. So to understand what is a problem, we can use this as a kind of formula which says where the problem lies. For example, when we conduct the assessment, it gives a feedback to check how effective the teaching was. If the students are not performing well, is it because the teaching was not appropriate? It was not appropriate for the learning that was expected. Or was it that the entry behavior assessment was not checked properly? Without understanding, without knowing whether the students are able to perform something or not, we have started teaching. So is it something like that? Or the third one could be that the objectives that we have set were not appropriate for these students, this level of students. Or it could even be that we have stated the objectives, or whether we have stated or not stated the objectives. Even if we have stated the objective, whether these have been communicated to the students, whether the students know what is expected performance from them. So it could be problem could even be with the objective. And the fourth problem could even be with the way we conducted the assessment. Whether this was the authentic way, we can check whether the students' performance was appropriate or not. So you can see here, this basic teaching model given by Glaser in 1962 can also be used as a formula to check how effective our teaching was and how to improve our teaching or the students' performance. When you look at this image, suppose there's a book that I want to pick from here. How easy would it be to pick a book? Perhaps not very easy, because the books are not properly visible and these are not properly arranged. So I do not see a particular plan in that. What we say in the word plan is, when we plan, we decide in advance what to do. Very simple definition of plan. The definition of plan is decide before doing. That is what is plan. If you do immediately without any plan, it becomes unplanned. So in the teaching also, what we can do is, if we can rearrange the books, for example, like this, it will be easier for anybody to pick whichever book he or she wants. So now you have the books which have been arranged in a proper manner, and there's a particular plan in the way the books have been arranged. So this becomes a kind of plan. The similar kind of plan, if we can adopt into our teaching, if we can use some tool to reorganize our teaching, to plan our teaching, it becomes much more easy for us and also for our students. So the plan for the tool for planning this is called as Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy classifies the entire learning into three areas. One area is called as the cognitive domain. These are called as domains. The cognitive domain is relevant to whatever the student is able to learn, to be able to state, to be able to decide. It's about knowledge, whether the student has a particular knowledge or not. The second level, the second part of this is called as psychomotor domain. Psychomotor domain is where the student is able to perform something, do something, some kind of a skill, eye-hand coordination. When the student picks up something, when the student drives something, when the student does something, it becomes psychomotor domain. And the third component of this is called as affective domain. Affective domain is what the students feel about something, kind of value for something, an attitude for something, or a communication about something. When you speak to somebody, it is affective domain. Please note, it is affective domain, it is not affection. So when you look at all these three words here, these look somewhat different because these are drawn directly from psychology, and these are the psychological technical terminology which any psychologist would use in relation to teaching learning. So this came about in the context of an association of American Psychological Association, which had a convention in 1950s about how to improve teaching, how to improve assessment. So this is an outcome which came out of the Bloom's committee. Professor Benjamin Bloom was the chairman of that committee, and the report is now called as Bloom's taxonomy, or technically Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives, how the educational objectives can be classified. What it basically says is that in the entire learning, when we are teaching something, the learning consists of three different areas. There could be knowledge learning, there could be psychomotor learning, there could be attitude or value or communication learning, and these are seen together in any learning. To give you an example, if I state a particular aim, now you look at this word, it is called aim. Aim is something which is very specific, which is not very specific, which is a bit more generic in nature. So for example, I have taken one example from health science background. Measure the blood pressure of a patient. Now when you say measure the blood pressure of a patient, this is the aim. It doesn't fit into any particular domain. It is neither, or it's not only knowledge, not only skill, not only attitude. There are a lot of other things which get into this. For example, there could be a combination of knowledge, skill, attitude, all come into this. But sometimes to organize our teaching or to plan our teaching, and more importantly, to plan our assessment, having a generic statement like this would not be useful. In fact, it could be counterproductive. Therefore, we need to break down this aim into specific objectives or specific statements, or statements which are specific to particular domain. Therefore, what we do is, the next level is to write the objectives. Write the objectives in the following manner. Like, to measure the blood pressure of a patient, the student will have to list 3 causes of hypertension. The student will have to wrap the cuff firmly around the arm of the patient. And third, the student would be in a position or able to relieve the anxiety of the patient before measuring the blood pressure. These are the objectives. These are the statements. When you look at these statements, each of these 3 statements support the student's performance of measuring the blood pressure. But these 3 statements are not in the same domain. These are in 3 different domains. If the student has to list the causes of hypertension, the student must have some knowledge. If the student has to wrap the cuff around the arm of the patient, the student must have the skill of wrapping the cuff and firmly. And third, the student must have the value or the communication ability to relieve the anxiety of the patient before he or she measures the blood pressure of the patient. So this is what, these are the objectives. In fact, there could be multiple. I have only shown 3 objectives. There could be 30, there could be 300, depending on the complexity of the aim or the purpose, what is expected. Now, if you recall the definition of education and the last 3 lines, we can see that we had the knowledge, skill, and attitude. And this is how the objectives have to be distributed into any learning, because any learning is not always purely knowledge, purely skill, or purely attitude. There's a kind of mix and match of these. Sometimes there could be a purely knowledge learning, but most of the time when we look at a composite learning, a comprehensive learning, it has the examples of all the 3 domains. And therefore, it is very important for teachers to be able to identify what is the domain into which the specific learning objective has been stated. Now, I would say that the teacher should have the ability to write the objective also. But at this level of introductory presentation, what I would expect the participants here, all of you, to be able to identify the given statement as belonging to the cognitive, affective, or psychomotor domain. To make your understanding a little more simple, when you read a statement, say for example, list 3 causes of hypertension, when you read it, what is the activity that is happening within you is your thinking. So whenever you are thinking, either to recall something or to decide something, the purpose is cognitive, or whatever the activity that is happening is cognitive, a thinking activity. Therefore, the objective of that thinking would be cognitive domain. The statement that you are thinking for doing it. For example, if you have to perform this objective, you have to think, list 3 causes. What are the 3 causes? This becomes cognitive domain. If on the other hand, you have to wrap the cuff around the arm of the patient or any such activity, what you will have to do is you have to do something. Thinking will not perform this objective. Perhaps you may have to think which is the cuff, how to wrap, where is the arm. All these are thinking, but the specific activity here is to wrap the cuff. It is not saying what the student should know for wrapping. It is telling simply wrap the cuff. So this becomes a psychomotor domain. Or the student, you have to do this particular thing. And when you have to relieve the anxiety of a patient, you have to communicate, you have to speak about what is the procedure that you are going to do with the patient. So this becomes a kind of value that you are showing towards that performance, and you are communicating about whatever activity that you are doing. This becomes a communication or a value. So when you feel that this is important, when you communicate something, when you have an attitude about it, that becomes the affective domain. And affective domain need not be always sympathy. It could even be negative. For example, somebody gets angered about something. If somebody becomes distasteful about something, if somebody is angry about something, all these are affective domain. It is something which affects a person. So this is called affective domain. So one thing we have to remember is, as a simple formula, if you are thinking, it is cognitive domain. If you are doing, it is psychomotor domain. If you are feeling, it is affective domain. With this in the background, I have a small interaction with you now. I will be stating some, I will be presenting some statements. What you have to do is, you have to identify whether these statements specifically belong to knowledge, skill, or attitude. And all these statements are taken from pharmacy background, because I did not pre-check whether there are faculty from other teachers from other faculty also. So please bear with me. But one thing is sure, that if you look at any of these statements, it becomes easy for you to identify whether this statement belongs to which domain. For example, when you say isolate caffeine from given sample, you can very well understand that to isolate caffeine or anything from the sample, it is not just thinking which will bring about. Somebody will have to do something. Therefore, this would be in the psychomotor domain. The second statement is classify nutraceuticals. If you have to classify something, what is required is to think what is the classification or how to classify. So therefore, it becomes cognitive domain. The third statement here is work actively as a member of healthcare team, or any team for that matter. To work as a member of a team, it is not just knowledge on what is the membership of the team, what are the activities that have to be done, but it is a kind of feeling, a kind of attitude, or a kind of value which a person must have to be active as a member. So this is not something which is simply knowledge or simply skill. It is more into the way we feel. It is value. Therefore, it will be affective domain. The next one, calibrate the hot air oven as per the given SOP. To calibrate the hot air oven, the student would have to perform something. Therefore, it will be psychomotor domain. The next one, explain the mechanism of halogenation of benzene. To explain the mechanism of something, it is not telling to whom. It is only telling explain the mechanism. So to explain the mechanism, it is a knowledge which is required, thinking which is required. Therefore, it will be cognitive domain. Perform an assay of calcium gluconate. To perform the assay or the test, the student will have to do something. Therefore, it will be psychomotor domain. Obtain mitotic index for the given data. Now, what is happening here is, a data is given and the student has to calculate the mitotic index. Perhaps the teachers from pharmacy faculty would be more able to understand this rather than the other faculty. Perhaps when you say obtain, Sometimes it looks as if it is something like a psychomotor activity, but because this is only a calculation which is done. Now calculation is not doing something. Writing simply is not to be taken as a psychomotor domain. It is a kind of secondary activity. The primary activity is how to obtain the mitotic index of the given data. That is what is cognitive domain. And the final one, describe the biosynthesis of purine nucleotides. So when somebody has to describe something, it becomes something which is cognitive domain. So this is knowledge or thinking. Now you can see that things were very simple, not very difficult. If you think, it is cognitive. If you do, it is psychomotor. And if you feel, it is affective domain. So what is required is for the teachers to be able to identify this at this level, and at the next level of learning to be able to write the objectives in this format. As you can see here, each of the first word is an active verb, and each of the statement tells what the student will be able to do. It doesn't tell what the teacher will do. So this is how the curriculum can be made learner-centric. So if you say that student is a focus on educational activity, we can make the student as a focus of educational activity primarily by writing the objectives which are learner-centric. So this is one of the major feature or the major function or the, you can say, major importance of writing the objective. So what is the importance of objective is that objectives are written student directed. Therefore, these help the course to become learner centric. The second important feature is that the objectives shift the emphasis from simply what the student will perform to how the student will perform. So this brings in the quality of performance also in the student. And the third one is rather interesting. Before that, you just look at this image. These are the traffic signals. If you are on the road, sometimes you can see traffic signals like this. One is telling keep left, the other is showing go right. Does it create some kind of confusion? A similar confusion, in fact, happens when, let me give an example. I am a teacher in a particular subject, and I am teaching to the students, thinking this is important, this is important, this is important, and whatever I feel is important, I am teaching the students. So when the exams come, the students go for the exam, and in the exam hall, the question paper is distributed. When they look at the question paper, sometimes they get stunned because the questions do not reflect what I have taught. Because the questions reflect what the other person who has designed that question paper thought is important. So my other colleague, whatever he or she thought is important, is coming as the question paper, as the questions in the question paper. Now the next level of confusion will creep in when the students write, however, somehow they write the exam, and when the paper goes for valuation, the person who's doing the valuation also has some idea what is important. So whatever answers the students have written may not match with whatever is the expected important thing that that teacher who is evaluating the paper thinks. Therefore, it creates a kind of confusion. Whatever you're seeing here is a kind of confusion that creeps into the education system because there is no common understanding among the entire stakeholders of education. Therefore, on the other hand, if you have a road signal like this, which clearly states without any confusion how we have to go, then nobody will have any confusion. There will be no accidents. Therefore, another important function of objective is that it improves communication. So when you have an objective which is written properly and which is shared with all the stakeholders, the students know what is expected of them to perform. The teachers know what is expected of them to teach. The person who is setting the question paper knows what kind of a question has to be asked for that particular year or for that particular course, and the person who is doing the evaluation will know what is the expected answer. So this creates a kind of communication network. It improves communication. These are some of the important functions of objectives. When you write the specific learning objectives, this is what will happen. It will improve the communication, and when the communication improves, the fear goes away. There is no undue fear among the students about examination. Nowadays, the major fear of examinations among the students is what might be asked. They will know what is the answer, But what not to write would be the problem for them, because if there is an answer, say if there is a short note, and the student is expected to write the answer in say about 5 or 6 minutes or maximum 10 minutes. If the student knows too much and the question is very non-specific, very vague, then the student ends up spending 30 minutes, 35 minutes into answering that one particular thing. So this creates a kind of fear among the students. Therefore, when there is a communication, when there is a clarity, there is no fear, and it also improves the education system. Now we come to the next level of how to identify which is the appropriate teaching method. How do you select what is the appropriate teaching method? One way of selecting the appropriate teaching method is depending on the student type. Depending on whether the student is a cognitive, the visual learner, or auditory learner, or kinesthetic learner, you can identify which is the appropriate teaching method. Now, for our to simplify our issue, what is seen is about 90% of our students are audio-visual learners. The combination of audio-visual activity in them. Therefore, whatever we use as the most common teaching methods, like a lecture with a blackboard, lecture with a PowerPoint, or demonstration with a video, all these satisfy the learners who are audio-visual learners. So student types will decide which is the appropriate learning method. The second factor is what is the context of learning. Now, whether the context of learning is in the classroom, or it is in the laboratory, or it is in the library, or it is somewhere else, like for example, it could be in the community. Depending on the context, there could be appropriate learning methods. Then there is a domains of learning. Depending on the domain of learning, whether you expect the student to acquire a skill or the knowledge or the attitude, there are some teaching learning methods which are more appropriate. And then depending on the size of the class, if the class is something very whether it is teacher or learner control. Who is dominant in the learning situation? Is the teacher dominant in the learning situation, or the learner dominant in the learning situation? This also decides which would be the appropriate method. Now, it is not that each of these are in isolation or these are different from one another. There is a considerable overlap among all these five. Say, for example, you take, for example, a lecture. Lecture is teacher control. Size of class is large. Domain of learning usually is cognitive domain. The context of learning is in the classroom, and the student types are audiovisual. So you can see that there is a kind of overall overlapping of many things which happen among all these five. There could be some areas where these have to be taken in isolation. So the next one is, how do we classify the teaching methods? We have evolved a very simple definition or a simple template for it. There are two variables. One is the learner autonomy, whether the learner is more in control of learning or the teacher is more in control of learning, and what is the size of the group, whether it is a small group or whether it is a large group. Depending on that, we classify the teaching learning methods on this basis. Like lecture or other whatever examples which are given, there are where the teacher is in control and the group size is relatively large. And as you can see, demonstration or tutorial, there is a relative decrease in the size of the group, but the teacher control remains. On the other hand, if you see on the right side, that learner control has become more, but the group size is relatively large for a seminar or a group discussion or a journal club. Whereas for the conference or field work or library reference, the learner control is there, but the group size has become smaller. Now, one problem with some of the audience could be that conference is shown as something which is individual learning method. The reason I have used it here is conference not in the context of the regular kind of context that we hear, national conference or state conference or something like that. I'm using this in the very specific context of educational context. So, for example, this conference is after your class, if some student comes to your department to ask for a doubt, to clear a doubt, that is, there is a kind of conferring with one another, talking with one another, conversation. So this is the conference in the context of education. Therefore, it is classified as a individual learning method. So these are some of the methods that we use for the conventional methods, conventional teaching methods. There is one more tool I would like to introduce to you. It is called Colin McNutt Learning Management Model. Not very new; it's quite old. In the context of e-learning, there are two ways that you have to identify the learning which happens. One is when you are using a method, how much does it involve the students into learning? For example, let us take the example of whatever is happening now. I am presenting something, I am talking, and I am sharing a screen. You can see the PowerPoint. The activity that you are doing, the engagement that you have in, is that you are observing this and you are writing the notes, or you are taking the screenshot. This is the maximum which can, the interactivity that can happen. The other is how much of the interactivity of the resource. So for example, in a lecture, how much can the students be interactive? So taking these two into consideration, if the student at the very lowest level, if the students are only making the notes and the interaction is only with the text and images which is online, this is the quantum of learning that would happen. On the other hand, if we state at the end of this lecture or at the end of this session, I expect you to perform these objectives, I list the objective, and apart from giving a lecture, I also give you some kind of an assignment where you can get involved into learning, where you are interactive into your own learning. Then you can see the amount of learning which happens. And then if I do not restrict you to only these tasks, if I tell these are the basic tasks, beyond this, you have the freedom to go beyond this into some of the other tasks that you can imagine are supportive for this learning. If you give some kind of a creativity for the students to practice, and the interactivity of the resource that is given is much more, the students can become involved into that learning or immersed into that learning. The amount of learning that can happen is phenomenal. So this is how you can adapt to an online learning environment. One more thing that you have to remember is the attention span of learners is not very huge. It is something like 20 minutes, but nowadays people are saying that it is something like 12 minutes. But whatever it is, at the end of 20 minutes or 12 minutes, whatever is the proper attention span, the students or anybody's attention keeps flagging down. Therefore, you have to do something at the end of the 12 minutes or 20 minutes to keep the attention span up and up. This is how the students can be attentive into your class. Now, one of the ways that you can keep this attention continuous is by using a medium. And one of the ways of using the medium is to understand which is the appropriate medium for the given situation. For this, Edgar Dale had classified the different media and their importance of learning, the impact on learning. What he said is, if the student is only reading, the amount of learning the student can retain at the end of 24 hours is only 10%. 10% of whatever he or she has read. On the other hand, if it is something like hearing something is coming from others, so it is about 20%, it improves. If it is something like seeing, when the student sees an image or a video, then the learning improves to something like 30% at the end of 24 hours. On the other hand, if the student is seeing something happening like a video or hearing the background in a kind of demonstration which is being done, the learning happens up to 50%. Up to 50% can be retained. Then beyond this is something where the student is actively engaged. So in the active engagement, when the student is involved in doing something, like in a workshop, it goes up to 70%. And when the student can teach something to others, it is in real manner, the student is involved in doing something, it becomes 90%. Now, how do you make it 100% is repeating all these processes over and over again. Now, when you look at this distribution, you can see that whatever is a passive learning is only up to 50%. Beyond that, it has to be active learning. And much of the way we engage students into online activity is passive. Therefore, it would be, I would say, unrealistic to expect the students to learn 100% with only online. There have to be something where the students can also engage themselves into learning, something which is real for them to learn, or maybe to reteach for them to learn. So this is what is required to be understanding about the online teaching, one of the limitations. One more thing that you have to remember is in the face-to-face learning, 55% of the learning is something which is about body language. When you look at a person, you make some you can identify that you make some impression about the person. So that is the communication which that person is giving. So 55% of the communication is from body language, and about 38% is the way people speak. So the tone of the voice and other things, they contribute for 38%, and the actual knowledge is only about 7%. So whatever I'm talking here is only 7% effective, unless I make an addition through the other activities. Now in the online, what we can do? In the face-to-face, this will work. In the online, the 55% is the way we organize the online environment. How user-friendly is the environment that you are using, and how comfortable are you in the way you are sitting and listening. These count for 55%. And the 38% is the way the teaching is organized. Say, for example, the way I am using the slides, the way I am presenting, all these account for the way I am doing it, account for 38%, and what I am speaking accounts for 7%. So this is what you have to understand. This is my understanding of how the online works. And in the online, there are two approaches. One could be synchronous, which is real time as it is happening now. The other could be asynchronous. For example, I have recorded this lecture and have placed it on my learning management system. You can access it whenever you feel it is convenient. So this becomes asynchronous, synchronous and asynchronous. There are some examples of synchronous and asynchronous. The synchronous could be having a talk, like telephone talk, or it could be a live chat over SMS, or it could be on the WhatsApp, or it could be a streaming video that we are conducting now, or a web conferencing. So suppose the number of participants is less, we can instead have this, instead of streaming, we can have it as a kind of a group discussion, which is web conferencing. So the asynchronous could be in the form of discussion board, or downloadable videos, or slide presentations, or it could be something like email communication, blog, wiki, tweets, which are more appropriately seen in as a combined or a bundle in the learning management system. Sometimes this can be also seen as individual, isolated, you can say individual apps. Say, for example, you can have a blog which is separate, you can have a tweet which is separate, you can have a discussion board in the form of a Padlet which is separate. All these can be separate also, and all these, but if these are presented in a combined form in a learning management system, it becomes easier for the student to remember the login ID and the password. Otherwise, they'll have to remember separate login IDs for each of these things. It becomes a kind of extra strain for the teacher also. Now, to reclassify all these online approaches into the same template that I had used earlier, when the group size is large and the learner, the teacher control is more, you can have synchronous methods like web streaming and podcast, or asynchronous, like again the recorded video or podcast. Now, one thing is, podcasts when they started, they were generally synchronous, but nowadays these have become more asynchronous. To the participants or the audience, they usually tend to listen to them at the time of their convenience. So it has become asynchronous. Now, there could be something which is a smaller group size where the teacher control is more. Say, for example, synchronous could be telephone, or could be WhatsApp or a live chat. Asynchronous could be again a recorded video. When the learner autonomy becomes more and relatively the group size is large, synchronous, you have the group mail, web conferencing, the various other aspects. And the same things can also be used as asynchronous. It is something like two sides of the same coin. It is the way we use them. And for the individual learning, mostly it is asynchronous. You can see the examples there. This is how I have classified in a simple manner. There are other classifications also. You can adapt to whichever classification is more easy for you to, more simple for you to adapt. When we are shifting to the online framework, one thing we have to remember is there's kind of disruption in our regular activity. If we understand how the transformation into the online platforms happen, it becomes easier for us because we would know what is the roadmap. For example, if we are in a very strange place, something which is new for us, I have come to a new place which I did not know earlier, I get lost. Similarly, if I did not know how to move around in the digital platform, I get lost. Therefore, when you get into a new place, you use a map or use a Google map or whichever is more convenient for you. Similarly, there is a map for shifting and for adapting to the online technology of teaching or the digital platform of teaching. It is called a summer framework. There could be other frameworks also, but I found this more simple to use. What it says is, initially the teacher only substitutes whatever he or she was doing on the conventional platform. For example, I was taking a lecture with a PowerPoint. Now I am doing the same thing as a substitution in front of a camera and sharing the screen. Nothing more. It's the same thing. Only the difference is I'm in front of the camera instead of the students. The second is, once I become comfortable with the substitution, the next level that I can check out is to augment whatever I am doing. Now, for example, once I get comfortable with this, I can add a Google form to take the feedback, and I can even use an app called Padlet for having online discussions with the students. This enhances my online presence and my online presentation. It has only enhanced. Nothing has changed. There's only some kind of an adaptation which has happened. Now you can see the adaptation happens. In that, I start modifying. Now, in the modification, what I could do is I can try to find out what are the options where I am going for asynchronous teaching. Like, I cannot expect my students to be always present at the time of my convenience, or I cannot be present at the time of their convenience. So to obviate this, what I would do is I would use a asynchronous platform, perhaps something like a content management system, where I can identify some open educational resources which are already there, or I can even create some educational resources and place them on the content management system, where the students can check whenever they find it convenient. In fact, email also can be one of the ways of, you could say, the asynchronous method, modifying it, sending an email or group mail. So the highest point of the shifting to online or digital platform would be something where we redefine the way we present ourselves as teacher, and this is where the transformation happens as a teacher. If I can develop a complete learning management system with the learning content, with the assessment, with the certification, with all these things, if I can do it, then I have transformed myself into an online or digital teacher. So this is a way, this is how a teacher can develop and grow into online systems. This is what is the reality. Students learn what is asked. They do not learn what is taught. Whatever you see on the left is called as washback. The sea is trying to wash back into the land. Similarly, the assessment also, there is something called as washback effect. What it says is learning is dependent on the way assessment is done. The examination systems are the most influential component in education system. The way we organize our the examination system, so will be the quality of our education system. Therefore, this is the reality. Students learn what is asked, they don't learn what is taught. Therefore, this is where the constructive alignment, which is spoke earlier about BIGS, comes in. If we can align the way we assess with the way we teach, with the objectives that we expect the student to perform, there's a complete constructive alignment. This is what is expected. And how do we do that? Is by understanding what are the principles of assessment. Very briefly, what is the purpose of assessment? One thing is, we are very clear, the purpose is to, as we see most obviously, to declare the student pass or fail in the university examination. That is what is sometimes generally thought to be the only purpose of assessment. But there are other purposes also which you have experienced. For example, when we conduct assessment in the class, it becomes an incentive for the student to learn. Now, assessment is not a very formal way also. It could be informal way of asking the students some questions and then telling them where they stand and how they have to improve their learning. It becomes an incentive for the students to learn. This is called as formative assessment. And it gives a feedback to the student and also the teacher, how the student is learning, how the teacher is performing, how we have to change our ways. This can be one way of diagnosing what is the learning problem, how the students are learning, what could be the possible problems of their learning. For this, we can also go back to that formula of basic teaching model, where the assessment gives a feedback whether the teaching was a problem, or entry behavior was a problem, or the objective was a problem, or the assessment itself was a problem. So this could diagnose what are the learning problems. Once we identify what is the learning problem, if there is a problem with the teaching, you can modify the teaching learning activities. Then there are some external, you can say extraneous purposes of assessment. One is that it can redefine the future of the program. If I identify that something is working well, I can improve that so that the program becomes better. If I know that something is not working well, I can change that. I can change so that the program becomes better. So it is a kind of feedback for the program. This becomes a kind of evaluation. And very important, what you have to remember is it is also a safety for society. Because when we pass somebody from a professional course, could be an engineer, could be a doctor, could be a pharmacist, we are telling this person is safe for the society. The society need not fear this person. So please remember, this is a very important activity that you are doing of conducting the exam, of certifying the students whom you pass as being safe for the society. When you conduct a test, there are some factors we have to remember. One is the assessment has to be directly related to educational objective. This is what we have seen in the constructive alignment. The assessment has to be authentic for the objective. Therefore, the objectives have to be written first. They have to be clarified first, and then the teaching, and then the assessment. Then it has to be concerned with something which is very important and useful. What we do is, when we classify the content, we also classify it as must know, desirable to know, nice to know. This is at a very higher level, little higher level. So whatever is must know and desirable to know is what is tested in the learners in the examinations, and whatever we state as nice to know is something which is not actually important for the student to be performing professionally. It could be something which the students learn for their internal purpose. Say, for example, if who is the father of some particular, say, field of pharmacy or something like that, it doesn't matter if the student doesn't know who is the father of that. What matters is whether the student is able to perform it. So this becomes something like useful. Say, for example, who invented this instrument? It doesn't matter if I do not remember who invented this instrument. If I can use this instrument, that is what matters as a professional performance. So sometimes in the Viva, we get into a lot of tangling with these nice to know of things which in fact create a kind of distortion of assessment. So assessment has to be concerned with important and useful matters, what is must know, what is desirable to know from a professional standpoint. And the third thing is, it has to be realistic and practical. You can have very lofty ideals about conducting examinations in a particular manner, but unless it is also practical and realistic to perform, not only for the teachers but also for the students and also for the institution, it is not something which is acceptable. Therefore, the assessment has to be something which is performable for everybody. Now, how does the assessment happen is, first you have the quality of the specific learning objective. You state the objective, check its quality, it is appropriate, and then which domain it fits into, cognitive, affective, or psychomotor. And then the next level is into which level within the domain. For example, if it is cognitive level, whether it is in the lower cognitive, intermediate, or higher cognitive. Similarly, for psychomotor and affective also, we have lower, intermediate, and higher level. So once you identify which is the level, then what is the appropriate medium for that particular level is also stated. And for that particular medium, there is a tool. Then you implement the assessment, conduct the assessment, you get the data, and on the basis of the data, you interpret, and the interpretation of the data gives you the result. For example, how do you decide whether the student has passed or failed? It becomes something like a decision for the summative assessment to tell the student pass or fail. Or if you say that the student has picked up only 30% of this, you still has to improve that. You give feedback to the student that you have to improve a little more in this area. So it gives a feedback. So the interpretation of data is the outcome which tells the students how the student is performing or how the student has performed. So basing on this, you can conduct the various assessments. And the tools of assessment, very basically, as I told you earlier, you have the domain, then you have the you have the level, then you have the medium, and finally you have the tool. For each of the three domains, cognitive domain, psychomotor domain, or affective domain. And these are the tools. I will not get into the details of this. Perhaps this would be in a very next level of learning. I only wanted to show you that these are the possibilities. And for an online assessment, the psychomotor and affective are not that very compliant, because we have still not developed a kind of either technology or the aptitude or the resources. But one thing that can be done is assessment for the cognitive domain, assessment of a cognitive domain, and mostly for the lower cognitive domain, or maybe to some extent at the intermediate cognitive domain. For that, you can have some online assessment tools like a selected response, where the students are given some options to select, say for example, in the form of multiple choice question, true, false, or a checklist is given. From there, the student has to select whatever is the appropriate answer. And this is very easy to grade. In fact, even as you can have experienced in the Google Forms, the machine itself grades and sends it to you. Or another thing is, it is only at the recall level, the lower cognitive level. There's another format also which can be used. It is called constructed response, where the students can write their answers. It could be very simple of filling the blank, or it could be a short answer or an essay. One thing I would suggest to you is not to use this for machine marking, because what happens is, when the students fill the blank also, if there is a spelling mistake, even if the answer is right, if the spelling is wrong, the answer is marked as wrong. So therefore, whenever you are having constructed response, use it for the personal marking, not for machine marking. And another feature of this is that even higher level of assessments are possible in the constructed response. You can ask the student about how the decision can be taken, what is the understanding, what is the interpretation. All these can also be checked in the constructed response. One thing that has to be clearly remembered about any online assessment is the possibility of academic dishonesty. There are ways and means of checking this, but one thing is to create an honest environment around us, so that we don't have to bother about academic dishonesty much. But this is something which is a realist thing. We cannot wish it away. Therefore, there has to be some kind of built-in mechanisms. Like, for example, there could be a streaming, proctored examination, where the student is in front of you with the web camera on when he or she is giving the examination. Or it could be something like when the student submits the assignment, it could be initially subjected to plagiarism check and then comes to you for assessment. Various methods can be adopted to overcome this kind of problem. Then whatever we are aware of ourselves is something which is the tip of the iceberg, which is explicit. But the potential that every person has, every teacher has, is something which is phenomenal. It is only the awareness that can bring about this implicit into, or this potential into the actual. Whatever is there within us is something which is potential. And when we become aware of this potential, it becomes something which is implicit for us, which becomes explicit for us, which becomes actual for us. Now, how do we become aware is by knowing what are the different tools. That is what I have presented. And as a kind of professional development, there are two or three more tools that I would like to share with you. Very basically, these are some of the propositions about teaching, which the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards in the US has said. It says teachers are committed to students and learning. It is not just learning, to the students also, to ensure that students are learning. The teachers know the subject that they teach, and also how to teach those subjects to students. And this is the how to teach those subjects, which is a little tricky. That is what we are trying to take care of, on how to teach the process of teaching in the way of a formal training that can be provided to the teachers. And the teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. The teacher responsibility does not simply end when they come out of the classroom or the laboratory, they are responsible for managing and to monitor the student learning even beyond the class hours. And how do you do that is something which we all can discuss. And the teachers think systematically about the practice and learn from experience. This is where the professional development of the teacher comes. We constantly think, for example, I have done something as a class, and I reflect on that. I reflect on that to check how effective it was, and I also reflect how I can make it more effective. For this, I'll have to develop, I'll have to adopt some concepts, some theories, and some learning formal training. And that is what courses like this provide. Another option for such a kind of professional development is to have a network of professionals to become members of communities of learning. So these are some of the propositions to improve teaching. Another tool that we have explored in the Rajiv Gandhi University is called CCAP, Curriculum Implementation and Continuous Assessment Plan. What we have done is, as you can see, that a very simple table there. The entire syllabus of 1 year we have classified into, suppose the syllabus is for 12 months, 1 year, we have classified the entire content into 8 modules, imagining that each of the module can be completed in a month. And for each of the module, we have written under these different topics, what is the topic or what is the objective or subtopic or sub-objective. And then for performing that, what the student's entry behavior has to be. And then we provide the activity that teacher does. But what we write here is not what the teacher activity is, what the learner activity is, what you expect the learner to be actively engaged in performing. And then the learner performance, which is almost similar to whatever the objective we already have stated. And for the learner performance to assess what is an appropriate assessment tool. These are the things we write for each of the module. And then it becomes a kind of easy for even this is shared to the students also. Students also know how they are expected to learn, and in fact they know in advance what is expected of them to learn. And the teachers, if some teacher is not present for that day, somebody can shift into that particular position and they can take up that topic or that course. So there is a kind of complete understanding of the whole curriculum and the way it has to be implemented. And to implement this at the very basic level, we have at the units of lesson plan. This is how the lesson plan is designed in our university. That is what we have been practicing, at least in some segments in the university. It's not something which is totally prevalent in all the faculties of university. We have about 7 faculties, but there are some smaller faculties, some faculties which have adapted to this. This has given a lot of benefits for both the teachers and the students. Now, at the end of this session, if you are able to discuss the components of curriculum, illustrate the basic teaching model, and relate the role of constructive alignment of BICS for both teaching and assessment, recall what are the factors that promote learning outcomes, how do you identify which is the appropriate teaching learning method or the medium, and match assessment tools authentically for measuring the outcomes. And if you are able to also understand a plan that can help you to develop as a professional teacher in the educational methodology, the purpose of this presentation would be somewhat served. I thank you all for this presence. These are the references which I have taken for preparing this presentation. If there are some questions, I can take them. Otherwise, I should be thanking you all for this wonderful presence that you had. Now, hand over to the college authorities, the coordinator, for if there are any questions.
Yes, sir. Till now, there are no questions, sir.
Okay.
Sir, we are finding out the questions, sir.
Fine.
Sir, can I ask a question, sir?
Yeah, please.
Sir, So wonderful session, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Actually, what are the learning management systems that we can adapt, sir? So far, actually, it is after the COVID only we got an exposure to the, say, from the March 7th, 8th onwards, we started, myself started learning the, this Zoom. And then I actually I gave training to the all my faculty. And then they started teaching me from the March 8th onwards the Zoom classes. So this is actually after the COVID only, very honestly say, online offline online teaching that is actually took place, sir. Now again, after the this much time of many attending webinars, and you like educational technologist, you gave a wonderful classes, and I attended my previous year two lectures, and similarly RC Sharma, and all with all I understand that as a principal, and we also maintain the certain learning management systems, learning management system softwares, similarly course management software. So what kind of the learning management systems we can adapt, sir, in our college?
So this this when you say learning management system, it has to be something which is very customized for your local needs, depending on the learner profile and the course that you have, the levels of course. These will have to be custom made. In fact, in our university, Rajiv Gandhi University, we are now developing a learning management system for teacher training, so that we can get all the teachers trained on the online platform. Like, for example, if some of you would have heard of Coursera provides a lot of MOOC courses.
Yes,
So similarly, we are also planning, the Coursera is a learning management system. There is something called as Canvas. Canvas also has a lot of courses, which again, Canvas again is a learning management system. There are some learning management systems which are free. There are some which you can be customized for our purpose. In fact, when we say free, the free is only the platform, but the cloud and the hosting and the other factors, they come extra for the
has to pay.
So again, for learning management system, you'll have to sit together as a faculty. You have to decide what amount of content you are going to shift for the online, because learning management system is something which is a digital platform. How much you will shift for the digital platform, how much you will retain on the regular platform, because there should not be overlapping between these two. All these things have to be taken care, and try to find out which would be the appropriate platform for you. But one thing that you have to remember is that this learning management system should not compromise on the security and privacy of the users. That is very, very important to remember, because in the digital platform, the data can be leaked and it can be hacked. Therefore, keeping this safe and private is very important.
Sir, one question from participant, sir, Dr. Sita Kumari, madam.
Yeah.
Sir.
Suggest few tools to improvise teaching methodology. Well, this is what I have explained here. One of the tools could be the use of Bloom's taxonomy. That is a very important tool to plan the education. Then there are other tools, like, for example, to identify for online, which could be the appropriate tool. If you use the Colin McNutt system, it becomes easier for you to identify at what level you have to use the tool. Then again, the different teaching learning classifications which I had given to you in that kind of a 4-square matrix, any of these can be used.
Sir, one more question from Sita madam, sir.
Yeah. Possible mentoring system. In fact, learning, we say teaching learning in a conjoint phrase. There's not a separate mentoring system. Learning, teaching, these are together. So whatever I have presented is for a kind of part of mentoring also.
Yes, sir.
Sir, what about the Moodle, sir?
Moodle also is a kind of learning management system. It can also be, it is a free software, but again, you'll have to customize it for your needs. It is customizable, and as I understand, Moodle and WordPress, these are the two most widely used learning management systems.
Yes, sir.
Sir, one more question from Dr. Chandrasekhar Patra, sir.
Yeah, time of set induction. See, set induction is the way you introduce the topic before you actually start the topic. The kind of examples that you give, the kind of curiosity you create in the students, that becomes set induction. So it could be some example that you have felt or with the students have felt. So to create a kind of, you can say, in the uh, curiosity and interest among students. There's not much of a time. It all depends on how much time you have for your lecture. Within that, I would suggest something like 5% of your lecture time can be used as set induction, not more than that.
Sir, one more question, sir.
What is the
From
ideal
Raghu.
number of learners through online learning? See, for this, you have to identify what is the type of online learning what is the approach we are using. If it is something like a synchronous learning, and if it is a streaming, there is no limit on the number of learners. Anybody can any number of people can participate. But if it is something like asynchronous learning, where we have the number of learners is limited, and we have made something like a batches, then I would suggest not more than 30, because that is the ideal number we have seen for any workshop. For any workshop or whatever is the small group learning, 30 would be the maximum size. I would say 10 or 12 is the optimal size. To give a kind of concept understanding for this, there is something called as Dunbar's number, Dunbar. Dunbar number is a sociological number which says what is the actual number of people you can become friends with. How much can you be comfortable in a group? What it says is 150 is the maximum number that you can be conversant with one another. That is a maximum number. In a crowd, if there are more than 150 people, we get lost. So within that, if the number is there for online also, perhaps that would be more ideal. Going by Dunbar number.
Sir, one more question from Priyanka.
Could you please introduce valuable resource for studying a new faculty development approaches and methods? See, there are faculty development approaches and methods. Perhaps what you're asking is in educational methodology. There are some courses, but in India, formal courses are very far and few. There is a course in IGNOU, Indira Gandhi National Open University, called PG Diploma in Higher Education. But what my experience was that it gives a lot of focus on the history of education and the sociology of education and the various things which may not be appropriate for a professional learner. Therefore, for professional learning, there could be customized courses that can be done. In fact, that is what we are doing in Rajiv Gandhi University. If your university or your institute is interested in having a kind of MOU with Rajiv Gandhi University, we can extend the same benefit to you also. In fact, in the past, we have extended this benefit to the pharmacy teachers outside of Rajiv Gandhi University also, when we had the collaboration with the APTA. In fact, there could be a APTA collaboration also for this, or there could be specific university or institutional collaboration also for this, because these formal courses are not readily available. Formal courses are available in the foreign universities, but these are very expensive. There's nothing less than 7 to 8 lakh for a 1-year course in educational methodology.
Sir, one more question, sir, from Sridevi.
Apply high level Bloom's taxonomy in curriculum. Yeah, it is possible. It is possible.
Yes.
In fact, whatever Bloom's taxonomy is a kind of tool which is to be applied in any context of teaching.
Sir, one more question, sir, from Joyita.
Conduct assessments, students find MCQs more comfortable. See, one thing we have to remember realistically is MCQs, whether it is selection or the completion type, these are the most possible realistic ways. Could be in the single best answer type, or it could be in the form of true false. It could be selecting the options in a check format. These are the options which are available. But if the teachers can develop further, and there is something called as extended matching question, where the situation is given, and on the basis of situation, the students have to analyze what are the possible options which are given. So it becomes a little more tough and complex in understanding. It is seen that multiple choice questions, if it is very simple, can be answered in 30 seconds, but extended multiple choice questions require at least about 2 minutes to think and answer. So there are possibilities where you can improve the complexity of multiple choice questions for online answer.
One more question, sir.
Best tips for online teaching, there is nothing like tip. You have to know everything. Because any presentation is something of your presence. It is your personality. There cannot be anything which is a surface presentation. It has to come as a kind of passion in the system, not only for the teacher but also for the whole education system. So I don't see there is any tip to improve. You have to develop the only tip is you develop yourself as a teacher. Online learning is more effective than normal teaching in our class. In this, it all depends on the type of learners that we have. I have conducted a study to get a comparison between the traditional teaching and online teaching for the same group of learners. We had a group of teachers. We conducted a short course in educational methodology, and for that, there is a contact session. Generally, we conducted that in the face-to-face format. But because of this pandemic problem, we could not complete it in the month of March. It got extended. Early this month, I conducted the same program on the online platform with my same resource persons. Resource persons were same, and the participants also were same. We had about 30 participants in that. I took the feedback from them. It says that about 18% of them says that online is more effective than the face-to-face. More than 60% say that they are same. Both online and offline were same for them. And about the rest of them said that offline was better, online was not that effective. So it again depends. If I do it for the another set of participants, perhaps the result would be different. Here we had teachers who were mostly professors, perhaps above the age of 40, and some of them might not be completely comfortable with the use of online technology. First timers perhaps. If you are using it for the students who are called as digital learners, who are the millennials, who are more conversant with using their tablets, with their smartphones, perhaps they might find it more comfortable. Again, the catch here is how the program is organized. It is not only the device or the medium which is important, but the kind of planning and implementation which is more important than the device. The kind of planning that we do can make it either effective or not effective. Special teaching tools for online teaching. Yeah, this is what I have presented to you. Some of the options I have presented, but tools I did not get into because the tools come with a brand. I'm not promoting any brand here. You can search on the Google for this particular thing, what could be the appropriate tools. In fact, one site gives about 75 tools. Some of them are really useful, can be used.
Sir, enough, sir. There are no more questions, sir.
Okay.
Javendra, Savitri madam garu unnaru chudandi. 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. At 12 p.m.
Yes, sir. I'm sure.
Teachers need to practice, training is needed. Yeah, I fully agree with you. We need to have some more experience, getting comfortable with this. That is very important.
Sir.
I think no more questions.
No more questions, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Actually, at the end, to summarize the session, is actually a practice, but your session to summarize is very difficult, sir. It is a vast areas. It is actually you have given the lecture, so where especially we understand very clearly that there is a VARK, that is the different kind of learners or learning systems are visual and auditory and reading and kinesthetic, and similarly synchronous, asynchronous learning, and there are many models for the assessment of the students. Similarly, the behaviors needs for the teacher when they are ready for the teaching, and everything behavior of the students, everything you described very greatly, sir. And you can see in the live comments, there are many comments are there. It's not new for you, obviously, but we are very much all the audience are they are very much thankful to you, sir, and they are expressing their gratitude, and thanks to you especially. In the live comments you can see also. So and so the senior most principal, even from Hindu college Samasivarao, principal Samasivarao, and Madam Savitri, and many senior people are attended in this session, sir, from the different states and different countries also. And it's our great privilege, sir. And I think it is not this section is enough for all of us. And you are the wonderful personality. I have gone through your entire Google about you, and I've seen that it is not new for talking to the pharmacy fraternity. You have the before this COVID also, directly rather than not online and direct offline platforms also, you have conducted the many FDP programs for many pharmacy colleges at the entire Karnataka. I have very much known to that, sir, and it's our great fortunate to have you here in this contest. I express my gratitude on behalf of my management, on behalf of me and my colleagues and all the participants. Once again, thank you very much, sir. And this journey will not stop here itself. And in the future also, we request you to sensitize much more about the in-depth and detailed one by one program about the how to the first of all train to this faculty, especially in the core groups, and later on the students. So how to communication develop between the teachers to the this one, and similarly, especially we like principals, how to manage this entire show, how to management tools are there, so that we engage these teachers systematically by giving a training as well as the to expose them the new different tools and the practices, and so that they will do the best way of delivering their goods either offline or online. And similarly, how the students are motivated, and so that they are very much So obviously, in this lecture, it's very clear that that simply that what we do in generally offline teaching, the visual and auditory learning, that is only with that only we assess the students, but it is wrong definitely, because other kinesthetic learners are also there and doing also they learn. So that kind of the students also we have to identify, and all the 4 category type of these things. And similarly, with a very wonderful you given the practically the preparation of the caffeine and some other examples are given by that, which so what kind of it comes under that. So everything we have understood, sir. And once again, on behalf of all the participants, management, faculty, so guests, and we are very much thankful to you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, all viewers. This is for today's session. The next tomorrow's session, the link will be forwarded to you through WhatsApp and through mail. This is Jogendra Kumar signing off today.